Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is our Year of the Heart 2022 and our journey through Brené Brown's new book called Atlas of the Heart. So we're on our own little journey during our Year of the Heart. This is chapter number 3, and remember that every chapter is the places that we go when ... So this chapter is the places we go when things don't go as planned. And when I saw that, I thought, oh goodness, this is the chapter for you, Carolyn, because, yeah, I don't like when things don't go as planned. So every time we talk about a new situation, there are some emotions that we talk about. And in this case, it is boredom, disappointment, expectations, regret, discouragement, resignation, and frustration. Because I think we probably all want it to go as planned, right? Or at least as we've imagined it in our mind. So I think boredom is pretty straightforward, don't you? When you think about boredom, you think maybe you've lost the zest and maybe there's just nothing exciting going on. The definition that they came up with is boredom is the uncomfortable state of wanting to engage in satisfying activity but being unable to it for whatever reason, right? But Brené shares, and I wonder if you might have examples of this in your own life or in watching your kids like she was, that her kids would often say how bored they were, and then it was on those days when they sort of like let themselves just sit with the boredom for a while that they came up with the most amazing things. Like her son was inventing something, and her daughter was writing a song and recording it and doing all kinds of creative things. So Brené thinks that boredom is not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes we're just go, 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 right? And we don't even sit and have those times where we might not have anything to do. And I mean, maybe we might be bummed that we don't have anything fun to do, but if you take a little bit of initiative, then you wouldn't have come up with something fun to do if you hadn't realized you were bored, right? So it can be a plus. So what about disappointment and regret? This is the one that I immediately thought of when I thought when things don't go as planned, because I am the best person at imagining the most amazing things. I told you about my fantasy journal and how I would write in it like things were actually happening, and it was like my manifestation sort of writing. But then when things don't live up to that, of course I'm going to be disappointed, right? And who is to say that I was setting up any sort of realistic expectation? And she does talk about expectations later. So disappointment and regret can range from mild discomfort to deep hurt. And in my experience, Brené says, as a researcher and human being, we underestimate both in terms of disconnection and the pain that they cause within us and our relationships. That's true, because she does talk a bit about how in her own marriage, if she and her spouse felt like they might have been disappointing each other or even themselves in not getting something done that they wanted to get done. And again, it has to do with expectations, which comes up next, but sorry, that's a kitty scratching. They just did not feel good about themselves or their marriage, and I feel like I got distracted during that sentence of what I was going to say. In terms of relationships, yeah, I was going to say more like Brené talks about a situation where it was her first birthday with her new husband when they were first married, and she never shared with him that her birthday was a big deal and that she had all these sort of family traditions and stuff that she never told him about it. So, and he probably never thought to ask, being a typical guy, and so of course she was going to be disappointed when he didn't know, first of all, that it was like something important for her to be treated like a queen or whatever her things were in her family. So yes, in relationships, if there isn't the spoken expectation that, again, we'll talk about in a second, and it's like, here, hey, this is what I need, or this is how I'm envisioning this weekend's gonna go. Like, and I'll just launch into the expectation part too, because Brené also talks about how when her husband and her got really good at this in communicating it, they would say to each other, like, hey, so what does your weekend look like? Or what is your expectation of this vacation that we're taking? Because he would watch Brené packing novels that she thought she was going to somehow read when they were on their way to Disney World, which, you know, the only thing she said she was going to be reading were the signs and how tall you had to be to go on the height restrictions and stuff. So it's important to know where to set your expectations. So that is how it's connected to disappointment and regret. Maybe your expectations are completely unrealistic. But there's a pretty compelling story that Brené shares about a gentleman, and he said that he always just felt like he should prepare for the worst, and that way that if anything better happened, then at least it was better than the worst thing happening. But then his wife died, and he was like, he first of all was not probably thinking that would ever happen, and that really was the worst. But he said that he felt like he had just, like, in her honor, he decided to change his way, because he felt like he had just wasted all of that time with her rather than setting an expectation of a better level of stuff and just only being like, yeah, we're gonna prepare for the worst. I don't think it's a bad thing, really, to prepare for the worst, right? Well, wait, what did they say? Isn't it like, hope for the best, prepare for the worst? I can't remember what that statement is, but if you're always living like that, where you're just always setting the bar of where you want to be at, like, well, at least it's better than the worst thing that could have happened, that's not so great. And if you think about, when we've talked a lot on the channel here about law of attraction, if you're at that level of your expectation being so sort of crappy and just like sort of barely getting through life, then good things probably aren't going to come to you, because you won't be on that same vibrational level as the better, happier things. So I like the balance that she and her husband came to together, where they would again say things like, well, what does your weekend look like? Well, what do you want to do for yourself? Like Brené would say something like, oh, I want to get in some pickleball, and her husband might say, well, I want to go golfing, and then let's go out to dinner together. Like, so they would sort of like prepare things. And I feel like I've been doing much better with things like that. And again, it's from working with a therapist, but because I have tended in the past to be disappointed or unable to communicate that something's important, or asking somebody to be there for me at a hard time or something like that, then I've gotten a lot better. And it's hard. It's very vulnerable to tell somebody what you need. Like, she talks about how, like, say you were going for this amazing job and you told all your friends, like, not that you were going to get it, but that you were so excited about it, it just seemed perfect. And then if you didn't get it, then nobody's even saying anything to you like, wow, I know you were really excited about that, I'm really sorry, and just sort of like being with you about that expectation and how your hopes were dashed. Because like not achieving something that you've really set out and wanted so badly is hard. But look at how much vulnerability it took for that person to actually share with so many people. Like, I know there have been times in my life where I've been nervous that other people are going to insert their opinion about something that I might be doing. So I don't want to even tell anybody. Like, I might have a really great idea to do something, and then as soon as you tell people, we talked about this when we were going through Simple Abundance, then all of a sudden you're seeing it from their vantage point, or you feel like there's expectations that they're setting up, or there's negativity coming in about your idea or whatever. So then I have held back from being vulnerable to even share things sometimes, because I just don't want anybody to tell me that I'm going to fail. Like, I want to keep on a higher expectation. But sometimes you do fail. And I think, like, as I'm getting older, I remember talking about this in 2019 when we were going through, or 2020 when we were going through Simple Abundance. I remember talking about failure and the blessing of failure. And it's hard to fail, but what I was going to say is, as you get older and then you have some of these things that you might see as failures, they might just be, again, like things not going the way you planned. Does that mean that it's a failure? Like, I'm sort of surprised that that isn't one of the things in here. As far as, I suppose it could be discouragement or regret would be similar to failure, but yeah, failure is probably like the failure is probably a thing or a state versus an emotion. Except you can sometimes feel like a failure too. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. But I like how Brené and her husband really came to that balance of checking in with each other and making sure that both of them were setting a realistic expectation, sort of keeping each other in check. And then in terms of disappointment and regret, I sort of skipped over the definitions, but disappointment is unmet expectations. The more significant the expectation, the more significant the disappointment. So think about that person with that job that they really, really wanted, and they're telling everybody, like, pray for me, it's like the perfect thing ever, and it's going to be so good for me, and I'm going to get a raise, and we're going to go on vacations more, and like, you know, there's all these things that are wrapped up in it. And that was a really significant expectation to set. But again, with that gentleman who was saying, like, oh, prepare for the worst or whatever, or just don't even set your expectations high because then you won't get hurt. That's not wholehearted living. When we think about Brené's definition of wholehearted living, you have to take some risks and be vulnerable and be ready that, you know, the more significant your expectation, the more there is significant disappointment that goes hand in hand in that. But if you never have significant expectations, then isn't that just sort of like a blah existence? So why not dream big? But maybe this is me saying this again, thinking about working in therapy, that with a professional, that maybe setting the expectations, but then also having some things in place so that, first of all, you can be gentle with yourself if something doesn't go the way it's planned, or getting some other people on board to help you make something come to fruition. And again, trying to prepare ahead of time. Like maybe if Brené had said to her husband about her first birthday when they were married that it was important and I would like it if we went out to dinner and maybe you could buy me flowers or whatever she wanted, then she wouldn't have those disappointments. And in one respect, it's maybe easier because she might be able to just console herself by saying, like, well, he didn't know and I didn't tell him. Because guess what? Wouldn't it be worse if she did tell him all those things and then he didn't do it? I'm thinking of an example in my life where just this past Christmas especially, so my dad's getting up there in age, as you know, and me being with him is more meaningful, like, as the years go by, just because I love being with him and hearing his stories, and I understand that he really could pass on at any time. So if you've had any older relatives, you know that the time maybe becomes even more important. So with Christmas coming last year, I just decided to say ahead of time, because I went and visited for about 5 days, which is longer than I normally stay, and I set some expectations, like these are some of the things I wanted to do. And so one thing I wanted to say to him was, like, I would love to spend as much time as we can together as possible. And so that's how I worded it. I didn't say, like, I want to see you every single day and I want to do X, Y, and Z and all that. And I also had the expectation that maybe it might not be as much time as I wanted it to be, just because he's busy and I guess I'm kind of used to not feeling like I have enough time with him. But what ended up happening was, because I was vulnerable and actually said that this year, I was shocked because I made some other plans, and then my dad had said, he came back and was like, oh, I cleared my whole day and we're going to do this and I'm going to take you here. And then I figured I'd see you this day. And it was like, I was shocked, you know. It was actually kind of good that I had sort of like set the bar low. But all I'm saying is that it was vulnerable of me to say I would like to spend as much time as possible, because yeah, he could have come back and I might have only seen him for 15 minutes or something like that. That would have been really small, but I was setting myself up for potential disappointment if he hadn't made extra time for me. And in this case, it was like he made so much more time than I was ever expecting, that I had to kind of say to one of my friends, I was like, I wasn't expecting this, but like my dad wants to spend the whole day together this day, so can I meet with you at a different time? So it actually worked out really well, and I'm glad that I was able to say that, and I'm glad that I made it clear that it was important to me, and the fact that he reciprocated with that was also good. And I wasn't prepared for how good it turned out to be. So I kind of had set my bar in the middle, which isn't so bad. So let's see. Again, I'm getting off track here. So she's talking about some things with her marriage. So again, setting up expectations about like, it's going to be a great holiday. I've got everything planned. And again, what are some things that you can plan for success? And what are some backup plans? Like, say things don't go the way you wanted in a holiday situation. Well, maybe you know that you have X, Y, and Z that you are going to be looking forward during that time, and it can sort of like cross out the times that maybe didn't live up to your expectations. And let's see, my sister-in-law is going to love her gift and be so impressed with dinner. And again, you have no control over some of these things. And if you are expecting that to happen and then it doesn't, Brené has a few scenarios. So like in this example, is there something that you need for yourself or your relationship that a gift and dinner won't deliver? If there's no response, or a response that isn't what you expected, will you still feel good about buying the gift and preparing dinner? So I encourage you to read these things on 46 and 47, because there are some scenarios about, I can't wait to share my presentation with the team and I'm going to blow them away. So again, it's about being realistic about your expectations. More about expectations, examined and expressed expectations. So the expressed expectations would be me being vulnerable, like I said. And she's talking here about the woman who it took deep courage right here for the person to say that she was going for this job, and of course that it was disappointing when it didn't happen. But if you aren't doing that, Brené had said earlier in this chapter, they are missing out on those moments of connection. And if she hadn't shared that with somebody, and then they hadn't come and said the thing, there was a friend that said, like, you must be so disappointed, I know how much you wanted that, then she would have missed out on that connection, and she would have been going through the whole thing by herself. And it's so much better to be able to just talk to somebody, about what's going on. Sometimes you just need to say, like, today really stunk and I thought it was going to be a good day. I was telling somebody 2 weeks ago, I was like, I was on my way to work, I was singing along with a Broadway thing, I got all green lights, and then I walked into work and it was like I had the worst day ever. So I think that was an expectation thing, because honestly in the car I was going, today's going to be a great day. I was thinking about Louise Hay and her pre-paving the day with the statements, and I don't know, there was some kind of karma or Mercury retrograde or something. That day was pretty bad. There are too many people in the world today who decide to live disappointed rather than risk the feeling of disappointment. That's kind of like the story, it's right here actually, the story of the gentleman who said, I used to think the best way to go through life was to expect the worst. That way, if it happened, then I was prepared. And if it didn't happen, I was pleasantly surprised. Then I was in a car accident and my wife was killed. So this is what I was saying earlier. Needless to say, expecting the worst didn't prepare me at all. That's true. You don't prepare yourself for that. And worse, I still grieve for all of those wonderful moments we shared and that I had not fully enjoyed. My commitment to her is to fully enjoy every moment. I just wish she was here now that I know how to do it. What about regret? What do you think is the difference between disappointment and regret? Regret seems more like deeper, don't you think? Disappointment could be like a passing phase. Regret can really be something that's deeply rooted in you. Both disappointment and regret arise when an outcome was not what we wanted, counted on, or thought would happen. With disappointment, we often believe the outcome was out of our control, but we're learning more about how to do this but we're learning more about how this is not always the case. Okay, yeah. With regret, we believe the outcome was caused by our decisions or actions. That makes sense. You could be disappointed that you didn't get a job, but you would have regret if say you were going for a job and you say you didn't prepare for your interview or something like that, and you were like, it's all my fault. If I had just prepared, like, that would be regret versus disappointment, because you would be taking ownership of feeling like it didn't work out because of the decisions that you made or your lack of action. Interesting research shows that in the short term, we tend to regret bad outcomes where we took action. However, when we reflect back over the long term, we're more often regret the actions that we didn't take. Yeah. What we didn't do, and we think of those as missed opportunities. So there's a story in this part about somebody who remembers that in grade school that he used to watch somebody get bullied, and he didn't take part in that, but he never really tried to stop it, and so it was a regretful situation for him because he didn't take action in that case. I bet you he'd have more regret if he was involved in the bullying, and then if something bad happened to the person. So Brené says, while some people disagree with me, I firmly believe that regret is one of our most powerful emotional reminders that reflection, change, and growth are necessary. In our research, regret emerged as a function of empathy, and when used constructively, it's a call to courage and a path towards wisdom. I believe that as well, too, because when you know that you might have messed something up and you have regret about it, you better believe you don't want to do that again. You don't want to be in that same situation. I've been better as I've gotten older again about being more gentle with myself, and maybe I blame myself for something, but I've been able to look at it as a learning experience, and I've been able to say in moments like, listen, I'm not proud about the way that I spoke to you in that situation, or the way that I flew off the handle, which is like my MO. But yeah, you can learn from it, and you can only prepare for future instances and try to become a better person all the time, right? So she mentions that mixed up in regret is also self-blame and even guilt. Yeah, these are not positive emotions, right? But she does try to say that through regret that you can learn that you want to do things better, so therefore there is moving towards wisdom. Yeah. In our work, we find that what we regret most are our failures of courage, whether it's the courage to be kinder, to show up, or to say how we feel, to set boundaries, to be good to others, to say yes to something scary. Regret has taught me that living outside of my values is not tenable for me. Regrets are not about taking chances, regrets about not taking chances have made me braver. Regrets about shaming or blaming people I care about have made me more thoughtful. Sometimes the most uncomfortable learning is the most powerful. So what about being discouraged, resigned, and frustrated? Those all sound similar, because discouraged and frustrated sound similar. Resigned is more like It is what it is, right? It's almost like complacency. Discouraged, resigned, and frustrated are also ways that we feel when things aren't going or didn't go as desired. These are the different definitions, and it includes the other ones that we've just talked about as well. Disappointment. It didn't work out how I wanted, and I believe the outcome was out of my control. I didn't get the job. There were a lot of applicants or something. Regretful. It didn't work out how I wanted, and the outcome was caused by my decisions, actions, or failure to act. So I didn't prepare at all for my interview, and they asked me all these questions, and I just stumbled over all my words, and now I regret that. Discouraged. I'm losing my confidence and enthusiasm about any future effort. I'm losing the motivation and confidence to persist. Yeah, because if things are continuously not going as you hoped they would or as planned, you would become discouraged, and you would start to just accumulate more proof that things never work out for me, so you're going to be just discouraged. Resigned, again, I kind of said it was like complacency. I've lost my confidence and enthusiasm about the future and making any effort. I've lost the motivation and confidence to persist. So that actually sounds worse than complacency. That just sounds like, well, resigned, when you think like I'm resigning for my job, like I'm giving up, or I'm breaking with it. So yeah, like a resignation. I guess I think like I've resigned to do such and such. I wasn't thinking about it in a way of, yeah, it's pretty depressing actually. I've lost the motivation and confidence to persist. Just taking yourself out of the game. And then frustrated, something that feels out of my control is preventing me from achieving my desired outcome. Yeah. Say you keep going for that job, and everybody else keeps getting it, and you have more experience than them, and you just start to sort of feel, we talked about resentment last time, so you start to feel resentful that everybody's getting what you want, and that because they're getting it, you can't get it. Things to note here, she says, feeling discouraged and resigned is about effort rather than outcome. With discouragement, we're losing the motivation and confidence to continue with our efforts. With resignation, we've totally lost the motivation to keep trying. Frustration sometimes overlaps with anger. Both anger and frustration can result when a desired outcome is blocked. The main difference is that with frustration, we don't think we can fix the situation. While with anger, we feel that there is something we could do. Yeah, so say you're frustrated about everybody else is getting the job, and you're frustrated because you don't think there's anything you can do. Like, you're doing your best, you're wearing the right thing, you're saying the right thing, you've put in all the hours, and you're just as qualified, and then for whatever reason, you're not getting picked. But with anger, you might be like, it's not fair. Yeah, I mean, you probably want to blame somebody and be like, that guy is always kissing up to my boss, and I like this one page. Like, this book is so beautiful because it has a lot of pages that are like a full quote. So this says, the idea of, quote, no regrets doesn't mean living with courage. It means living without reflection. That's interesting. Yeah, because if you weren't looking back and analyzing everything, you probably wouldn't have regrets. To live without regret is to believe that we have nothing to learn, no amends to make, and no opportunity to be braver with our lives. So wouldn't you want to have regrets in that case? It makes it sound like the regrets are a positive thing, because if you're not regretting anything, then you haven't learned anything from things that didn't go your way. And then if you don't have regret, then that means like you just think you're fully formed and perfect, and you have nothing to change and no opportunity to be braver with our lives. I like that. It makes regret doesn't sound so bad, like if you have some regrets about things. Having regret, it means that you have put yourself out there, and that maybe didn't work out, but you made it through that. I was just thinking of something from Eat, Pray, Love, and I feel like there was a character over in Bali that was reading somebody's palm or something, and the quote was something like, if you have heartache, it's because you have loved. So it's not it's not as bad as you think. It's because like having heartache means that you tried, because you did put your heart out there, and then maybe it was rejected or hurt, but you tried. It wasn't like you sat home and didn't even try to find love. So it's a similar sort of thing that just came to my mind. So what do you think so far of this book? Are you getting something out of it? It's different than I was expecting. The definitions are interesting because they are also a different way of looking at some of the words that I wouldn't have thought about in the same way. Like, just like that resigned word, I wouldn't have thought about it in that way. But I can see how it's organized, because when something doesn't go the way that you want it to, then they've done this research that shows that these things that we just talked about today are the things that happen for most people. So it is a research project, and it's interesting to know that the reason for a lot of these things are because things didn't go our way, right? So we will be back with the next chapter about, this one sounds more inspirational. The places we go when it's beyond us, and not like the other one was when things are too much. This is more like when magical things happen, like when it's just like beyond our imagination. So I think I'll like that chapter too. Stay with me for more from Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart, and for more from our Year of the Heart. Hope you're all doing well, and I will see you on the next video.